Everybody, it's Elizabeth and welcome back to the farm. So today I'm going to be sharing this video on both of my YouTube channels because I feel like this really does belong on like a personal vlog channel since it's a life update. But I also wanted to share it on my gardening channel because you guys have been with me for so long and you have watched my children grow up over the years. And it's also where I shared the news of this event on my community page, was on my original gardening channel. So I thought I would do kind of like a story time version of telling you what happened with my son. And at the end, I have some news to share about how he's doing, as well as other news in our community that I wanted to put out there. It was Tuesday, August 9th, so it has been 6 days now since my son was in a wreck. That morning, he went to a larger town, but still a small town nearby. He went to Walnut Ridge, Arkansas to apply for jobs. He was very, very, very excited. He is homeschooled. He does an online program, and he really just has about a month or two left until he graduates. He's hoping to go to college in January, and so pretty much he doesn't have very much to fill his time the next several months. So he was excited to job hunt after we returned home from our big family vacation. So he went, and when he was there, after he would stop at different places, he would text me and let me know if they were hiring or not, or what they said, or if he needed to apply online, or just different things, and asking my advice on where he should go next and whatever. So we stayed in communication. Also, I do have Life 360 app on my children because I am a very overprotective mother, and I am not ashamed of that in the least. So I always know where they're at. And I've always told my kids, do not drive and play on your phone, period. And they don't. And it could be because they're boys, and it could be because, they've only been driving 6 months to a year. But so far, they do that. They listen to me, and they don't play on their phone when they're driving, because that app will tell you if they've picked up their phone while they're in motion, just so you know. So if you've not heard of Live 360, I highly recommend it. It's not a free app, but it's very much worth it. So he's driving around, going to these different places in Walnut Ridge, and he stops and gets himself something to eat. And then he texts me the last time that he was going to stop by Walmart and follow up with him because he had already applied online there, and then he was going to head home. So I didn't expect to hear from him again because I knew that shortly after he was going to be driving and heading home. I was sitting here in my office talking to my older son about a new app that we can use to track his glucose monitor that he has in his arm. He's a type 1 diabetic. And we were just sitting there doing that, and someone knocked on the front door, which is really weird. No one ever knocks on our front door because when we do have visitors, they're family and friends, and they just walk in. So that, and my office is actually in the back of the house, so I don't usually hear anyone knock on the door. But Riley and I had been talking, and we were then not talking. And so it was like really quiet, like it is right now. And someone knocked on the door. I'm like, that's weird. So I immediately felt kind of alerted to the oddness of it. So I go to the front door, open the door to find a teenage boy who I did not know who was, but I recognized him. So I knew him from seeing him around, and that he hung around with my husband's older boys who are older than my kids. And he said, Connor's been involved in a wreck. He hit a tree between here and Eaton. And I said, okay, I'll get my stuff and we'll head that way. And he said, do you want to just follow me? And I said, no, I can find him. I need to get my other son and whatever. He said, okay. He left. I ran back here to my office where Riley was still sitting on the floor, told him Connor had been involved in a wreck. We had to go grab my purse. We were literally out the door. On the way to my truck, I texted my husband and said, Connor's been involved in a wreck near Eaton. We're going there now. And he was actually taking, just right before that, I knew that he was taking his kids to Batesville. So he would have been on his way back from Batesville and headed to work. So I knew he wasn't just at work. So I knew he may not see it right away if he was driving or whatever. So Riley and I head that way, which where we had an idea of where this was less than 5 miles from our house. But for some reason, when I got about a mile down the road, I ran every stoplight between here and there. And by the time I hit Blacktop, I went 90 miles an hour with my flashers on. And by the time I hit Blacktop, I thought I should call Connor. Call his phone and see if he's just sitting there on the side of the road with his phone. So I call and it just rings and rings and rings. And then panic struck me because I thought if it was that bad of a wreck, if he doesn't have his phone on him afterwards, then it must have been really bad. Or maybe he's not conscious. I don't know. So, trigger warning, I will share some photos in this video just kind of explaining so you can get the full effect of it, because I don't know that I could ever just verbally explain how terrifying everything was. So there's going to be pictures. So if you don't like seeing stuff like that, it's not gory, bloody stuff. It's car wreck, looks terrible stuff. Okay. So driving down the road, 90 miles an hour, flashers on, silence in the car. Riley and I aren't even talking. We're both internally freaking out. And Eaton is actually not a town. It's just like a community. So there's just one place on the highway where you pass a sign that says Eaton. And I knew where that was. So as we got closer, I met two different cars that had their flashers on that were coming in the opposite direction to let me know that there was a stop ahead. So I knew I was getting really close. So I slowed down and I came up over a hill and I could see cars pulled over to the right side of the road. So I began looking everywhere for his car on the sides of the road. And then I saw it on the right side of the road. So I have a picture of what that looked like from that angle, which was taken afterwards, of course, not in that moment. So as soon as I saw his vehicle, which looked freaking horrible, he centered a tree. So the front of his car was destroyed. I didn't see him anywhere. There were all these cars on the right side of the road, so I immediately find somewhere on the left side of the road, take a ditch to get my truck off of the road, pull into the ditch. I was not going 90 by the time I got there, of course. There was cars and people everywhere. Pull over into the ditch, turn my truck off, left my flashers on. All I took with me was my keys and my cell phone because it was in my pocket. Come out of the truck, look across the road to where I'm pretty much parked across the highway from where his wreck was, but his wreck was up on an embankment and then into a field and into a tree. So I look at the wreck and I'm looking everywhere to see where my kid is. There's not even an ambulance there yet, you guys. This has all happened so soon. And then I finally saw him. And when I saw him, he was sitting upright in the back seat, like the back passenger seat. He or someone had walked him around and set him down there. I guess because it was an easy place to sit down. So he was sitting down in the back seat with his feet, outside of the vehicle. He had a neck brace on. And I immediately just ran up there to see him. And he was confused, very sweaty, because, it was hot outside. But also I think there's kind of like a nervous reaction. And his eyes were like just barely open. Like if you're like half asleep, your eyes are like that kind of thing. And he had 2 or 3 older gentlemen right there beside him. One was squatted down on the ground looking up to him, talking to him and whatever. He had no visible injuries, thank God. Again, the car looked horrible and nobody had any idea what had happened. So now at this point, I'm gonna take you back just a little bit and tell you Connor's version of what happened leading up to me getting there. So he says now, after the fact, of course, with major wrecks and shock and trauma, memories can begin to pop back in after afterwards, which is exactly what's happened with him. And I just want to tell you, this is my 16-year-old, and he had had his permit for 6 months, but he had only been legal to drive alone for 9 days. Okay. But he'd been practicing driving with his permit with this car for 6 months. Okay. So anyways, he told me that on his way home from Walnut Ridge, he was tired, and that he was probably tired because he didn't sleep very much the night before because he was so excited to go apply for jobs. And so he just had a really hard time falling asleep, and he wasn't really sure how much he slept. But then he woke up super early, and that morning before he left, he acted totally normal and fine. I made sure he ate something. I made sure he took his medicine. Made sure he had everything he needed, that he had money to get some lunch in town if he wanted, and just his spirits were great. He was totally normal, wasn't acting tired at all, or I wouldn't have even let him go, honestly. So on his way home from Walnut Ridge, feeling tired, he didn't think that there was anywhere convenient to pull over, and he thought that he would just make it. He didn't think he was going to fall asleep. He just felt really drowsy. But then what happened was he did fall asleep, and he remembers waking up about 2 seconds before the crash. He opened his eyes, and he was going up the embankment and centered the tree. And then he doesn't think that he passed out at all, because he does remember things after. And he didn't remember like being thrown around or, just whiplash or anything like that. And all of his airbags went off. He has side curtain airbags and everything. Thank goodness they all did exactly what they're supposed to do. He sat there, and he said what felt like 20 minutes and like 10 cars driving by. Nobody saw him. Nobody stopped, and he couldn't find his phone. So he was worried about how anybody would ever see him there. So he actually just opens his driver's door, which he could open, thank God. And he got out of the car. And that was when, so the Good Samaritan saw him, which was actually a family. And the teenager of that family is actually who drove to my house. So they knew who he was. They knew who I was, but they didn't have my number. He couldn't remember my phone number. In the first 20, 30 minutes of the wreck, before the ambulance even came, which we do live very rural, so I'm not mad or shocked about how long it took the ambulance to get there. We have a lot of volunteer first responders in our community, and a lot of them showed up. So by the time I was there, 4 or 5 of them were there. 5 or 6 more came. And they're all really trained. My husband used to be a first responder, and they're all really, really good people. So they are actually who brought the neck brace before the ambulance even arrived. They did the neck brace because he was in a wreck, but also because he acted like he had head trauma. He didn't remember what happened. He couldn't remember his name. He couldn't remember his birthday. He couldn't remember anything. And so now we're to that moment where I'm standing there in front of him, and this has been about 30 minutes after the wreck. And the reason that I know the timeline is because of the Life 360 app. The Life 360 app is supposed to notify me when any of my children are involved in a car wreck, and it did not. So I was really mad about that, and I'm honestly still debating calling them, somehow complaining something, I don't know. But what it reported for that drive is that he was never speeding, he never picked up his phone, and that he had a hard braking incident when he went off the road and when he hit the tree, but he never hit the brakes. There were no skid marks, no nothing. So he never actually hit the brakes. So the app thought it was hard braking, but it was actually impact moments that they missed, which still makes me mad. I could have known 15 minutes earlier, maybe 20, had the app actually worked. And the app is supposed to call 911 for you and send the GPS coordinates and then call you to ask you if you're okay. It did none of that, which still mad, but whatever. So anyways, they thought he had head trauma. So then by the time the ambulance arrives and they get him moved and put him in the ambulance, they won't let me go in there with him. So I'm standing there outside of the ambulance about to lose my freaking mind, and they evaluate him, they check everything, and by then he's beginning to recall some memories. He could tell them his name, and he could tell them his birthday. He still didn't know what happened with the wreck, but the possibility of head trauma was less severe. So Because there was still a chance, they called for a helicopter life flight to come and get him and take him to Children's Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. So then they finally let me come in the ambulance to check on him, and they had, of course, cut all of his clothes off. He has scrapes and bruises all on his arms here, and not really sure how that happened. We assume the airbag. He's got a bruise right here on his face, and he has a bruise from the seatbelt across his chest and across his hips, and then the seatbelt actually cut him. And on one side, the left side where it was worse, there's actually a laceration that's about, I don't know, maybe like an inch long, where it dug into his skin. So I saw that for the first time in the ambulance because he had his clothes cut off, so I could see the cut there, but I could also see it wasn't that bad. When they pushed on certain places of his body, he responded with intense pain, so they didn't know if he had broken bones or organ damage, so it was still very important for them to fly him to Memphis. In the ambulance, when I got to talk to him the first time that he was kind of coherent, this is my child who has generalized anxiety to begin with. He takes medication for it daily, so I knew he was terrified and he was scared, and I was scared. So I just leaned down there and like rubbed his head like I always have since he was a baby, and I said, "Connor, Mom's here. I'm here with you." And he had his eyes closed. Like, I knew he was awake, but he had his eyes closed because there was just a lot of crap happening around him. He opened his eyes and he said, "Mom, I'm sorry." And I just told him that it was okay. It was an accident. It didn't matter. Him being okay is all that matters. And then I stood there for a few minutes while they were doing some other stuff, and I could hear that the helicopter was arriving. So I told him, I wanted him to know what was going on. I didn't know if they had told him. So I told him that a helicopter was coming to take him to the hospital, and they would not let me ride in the helicopter with him, so he was going to have to go without me. And he started crying, and that just broke my heart. So after that, things happened pretty quickly. The helicopter, they made me get out of the ambulance so they could check him again. The helicopter arrived. The helicopter EMT came in and evaluated him all over again. In that time, they were pushing on his hips, and he was like screaming in pain, which was horrible. They finally, everybody got my phone number, state troopers, EMTs, everyone, so they could call and give me updates, and they leave. Mind you, during this whole time, my oldest son is just standing beside me like a statue. He's very calm in stressful moments, and he's pretty calm actually 24/7 because I'm pretty sure that he has Asperger's. But anyway, so he was there, and then my husband was there. I failed to mention that before, but he actually arrived on the scene like maybe 10 minutes after me, just before the ambulance got there. And so he was helping with everything, and when they moved Connor to the ambulance, they went and got all of his personal belongings. My husband went and got all of Connor's personal belongings out of the car. He moved our vehicles out of the way when they were in the way of the ambulance and stuff like that. So then they take him in the helicopter, and I'm standing there bawling, of course. We take our two vehicles back home. We all get together in my truck, and we grab clothes for Connor, and like a cell phone charger, and just run out the door. And we've got a 2.5 hour drive to Memphis. We get maybe an hour down the road, and I get a call from the EMT letting me know that he had arrived in Memphis at the hospital safely, and that they were going to evaluate him and give the nurse my number for them to call and give me an update. And then they never called. So I spent the next hour and a half thinking that there was actually a possibility that he died from head trauma, and they're not going to call and tell me. They're going to wait until I get there because they know that I'm coming. And so it was the most difficult drive of my life. I'm glad I was the passenger. I probably would have been going 100 miles an hour if I'd been driving. I was trying to, everyone who knows me knows that I'm a happy, positive person. I'm very spiritual. I believe everything happens for a reason. I believe that God doesn't give you more than what you can handle. But thinking about the prospect of losing my son, my baby, was suffocating. Definitely the most horrible thing I've ever dealt with. And, you know, in that moment and the few days after, I thought, you know, I can't deal with this. Like, just, I didn't know how I was going to get through that moment. My husband was very supportive. He's an amazing partner. He's wonderful to me and for me. But on the drive is when I decided to let family know everything that had happened, because some people who had stopped on the side of the road from our community who know us had already posted on Facebook that they were praying for us. The local small newspaper had already, I mean, it's a newspaper, it used to be a newspaper, but now they post articles on Facebook. They had posted an article about a 16-year-old in a wreck being life flighted out of there. So everyone was wondering who it was, and there was just a lot of that going on, and I wanted to let my immediate family members know immediately. So I typed up this long story explanation with a few of the pictures I took from the scene, and I sent it to like 30 of our closest family and friends, asking them to pray for him. I didn't want to share anything publicly until we knew the extent of the damages to his body, because I felt like it was unnecessary to make our community worry anymore until I had some sort of news. So while I was doing that and people were responding back to me, that kept me busy. But when there would be nothing to respond to, I would find myself staring out the window thinking that my kid could be dead. And it was horrible, horrible. So finally we get there. And by the time that we find like the ER entrance and pull up, my husband literally just pulls in there and I jump out of the door. And my older son went with me, and he said, just go and I'll find somewhere to park. So we ran in. They told us where he was at, and the way they were acting when they looked up his name and told me where he was made me think, okay, he's in a room. He's not dead. I don't know if I can even say that word on YouTube. Anyway, so walk as fast as I can down the hallway, and then finally find the room, and he's in there by himself, still has the neck brace, and he's laying there, and he's alive. So I go in and I see him, and he was like asleep actually, and I said, are you okay? Why are you sleeping? Are you just tired? Whatever. And he's like, well, there's nothing else I can do. I'm just sitting here staring at the ceiling. And then him and his brother start joking and making fun of each other and acting totally normal. And a lot of my anxieties fell away at that moment, because I knew that he was okay, at least. It was maybe only 10 minutes before the pediatrician came in to talk to us. My husband also got in there pretty quickly. I was really proud of how quickly they got to us and came in and gave me the full update. By the time I got there, they had ruled out all head trauma. There was nothing wrong up here. So that's all good, and that was our biggest fear. They had done x-rays down to the waist because they suspected damage in his hip area, and they were just waiting to get that back. It only took us maybe 30-45 minutes before they came back and said that he had a fractured hip and that he could not walk on his left side for 4 to 6 weeks and was going to have to follow up with ortho. So then the nurse comes in with a walker and crutches to try to teach him how to use those, because he needs to stand on the right side, not put any weight on the left side. When he goes to get out of the bed and to stand up, he like hollers in pain, and he says, my foot hurts, his right foot, because that's what she was wanting him to stand on. And he said, it hurts. He said, I can't stand on that foot. It hurts too bad. So he sat back down in the bed. Mind you, from the ambulance, from the helicopter ride, they gave him morphine for pain. But it's something that doesn't last like a really long time. So by the time, probably about 2 hours later, when they had him standing up in the hospital bed, most of that had worn off, and he didn't have hardly any. There was probably a little of it still in his system. But that's whenever he was beginning to feel pain and his foot hurt. And so I asked the nurse, I said, did you guys x-ray his feet? And she said, you know, I don't know. I don't think so. So let me go check. She comes back a few minutes later. They did not. They x-rayed down to his waist, basically, to his like pelvic region. So then we had to wait for them to go take him, do x-rays, come back, and he actually had a hairline fracture in his right foot as well. So he can't stand on his left or right side fully, either one. So they put him in a boot for his right foot, which was very fitted, very structured and fitted, to stand on that foot and alleviate the pressure on the left side of the hip. And we were able to get him up with a walker in the room, kind of moving around, and then felt confident that we were going to be able to handle that at home until, you know, whatever. So they come in, they explain discharge instructions. We have to follow up with ortho. They want him to follow up with a neurologist to see if he has narcolepsy, because of my concerns I shared with the doctors. And then I think they say the hip fracture takes 4 to 6 weeks to heal, so we don't know how long he'll actually be on crutches, but I assume that long. But then now let me get to the good part, because this is getting long. So they asked if he wanted a strong painkiller. Leaving the hospital, they asked me, and I said, would 800 milligrams of ibuprofen be enough for what he has in his injuries, or is that, you know, crazy for me to think that? And he said, the doctor said that that would get rid of the majority of the pain, and at his age, he would prefer he just be on ibuprofen, as the other meds do work, but they are highly addictive and yada yada. So I said, I'm a fan of just ibuprofen myself. That's all I've ever personally taken after one bad interaction with a really strong medicine when I was younger. So we went that route. And they gave him something really strong for the car ride home. So they gave him a pill there in the hospital, which I think was probably Tylenol and codeine. And they said, when we get home, immediately start ibuprofen every 4 hours. So we had, again, a 2.5 hour drive home. There's a story about what happened as we were leaving the ER that involves another person that was crazy. If you guys like hearing stories like this from me, let me know and I'll do a different video on that. This is just going to be too long. We make it home, and getting him in the truck was very difficult. My truck is lifted and it has running boards, but Jeff basically ended up just picking him up and putting him in there because it's hard for him to step and to pivot and all that stuff. So he got him in there. He was good. He slept most of the way home because of the meds. We got home and it rained and stormed its tail off the whole way home. The biggest lightning show I have ever seen in Arkansas. The whole last hour. It was insane. It was like Jesus was coming back. It was bad. And not like tornado weather, but just like lightning storm. Lightning storm. It was insane. So, but thankfully, by the time we got home, the rain had stopped. I was worried about the porch steps being slippery and all that jazz. And he actually got out of the truck and up the steps just fine with just minimal assistance, made it in the house. And since then, this kid has seriously had a miraculous recovery. They all told him day 3 the pain would be the worst from a wreck, that's typical. He never experienced that. By day 3, I had reduced him from 400 milligrams or 800 milligrams of ibuprofen down to 600, and he actually doesn't even need it every 4 hours. He's taking it every 6. By day 2, he went from the walker to the crutches, and now he's down to using one crutch on his left side to keep that pressure off of his left hip. He can get in and out of bed alone. He can go to the bathroom alone. He can take his boot on and off alone. The only thing I'm having to help him with now is changing his bandage on that hip, on that laceration. He is doing so amazing. I think it was 3 days later, we went to see the car at the tow truck place because he wanted to see it, and his cross necklace that was hanging on his rearview mirror, Jeff could not find, and so he didn't get. So we wanted to try and look for that, but I wanted my child to see the aftermath of his vehicle and the severity of the situation, because even though he was doing great and healing great and everything was amazing, he did still cause that wreck, and that is his responsibility, and he has to take ownership of that. So I wanted to do whatever I could to make sure that really hit home for him, and I think it did. He did cry a little bit when he saw his car because he loved his car. He's a car guy, and he loved that car. So he was sad about that, and he's just, over the last, almost week now, he's just said, 10 times, I can't believe I survived that. Everybody says I should have died. I'm lucky to be alive. And he really is. He is so lucky to be alive. I want to thank you guys for your support in all of this after I posted on the community page. Between YouTube and Facebook and all of our friends and family, we've probably had over 200 or 300 people praying for my son. We feel that, and we really, really appreciate that. So his recovery is going really, really great, better to be expected, and I'm just really stoked. Honestly, the worst thing I have to look forward to at this point is the helicopter bill. We do have private insurance, but there's really no, I've got to call them today and see if I can get numbers, because I'm a numbers person, because I'm a bookkeeper by trade, and just kind of try and figure out what the damages is going to be. But that's okay, and we'll just make payments on it, and we'll deal with it and get through it as a family, because I know we can. I also want to share something with you just for you prayer warriors out there. And if you believe in sending good vibes and good energy, whatever, do that too, please. But I was like a shell of a person, just going through the motions the first few days Connor was home. I could not work the first 2 days. I was just by his side constantly. So thankful he was alive. Kept thinking I would have flashes every time I closed my eyes of the scene, the car, all that stuff. The moment I drove up, I had actual PTSD symptoms, but I tried to process them a lot. I prayed a lot. I meditated a lot. I did some journaling. I tried to honor my feelings. I tried to not be superwoman and do everything. So I processed through a lot of those emotions. Then on 4 days after Connor's wreck, you guys, so this is now 2 days ago, a 21-year-old young man in our community, who is actually my cousin's son, so he's my second cousin, was on a boat with a friend fishing and fell out of the boat in Black River, which is a really big river, really huge, like a mini Mississippi. But it's big for around here. But anyways, it's deep. It has strong currents. It's always flowing. It's not like a creek or a little river or anything. Anyways, he fell out of the boat, and he's not been seen since. So they are assuming he has drowned, because the friend who was driving the boat, who saw him fall and looked and tried to find him, never saw him resurface. We have no idea. I have no idea. I've thought for days now, how could that happen? What happened? What's going on? Whatever. But they've been looking for him for 2.5 days now. You guys, this happened Saturday at like 4 p.m. and they've still not found him. I have goosebumps all over my body. I've been sick to my stomach for days on end, because I love his parents. Everybody in this community loves his parents, loves this kid. My husband watched this kid grow up. He hung out with his boys. He was at this house all the time. And now he's just missing. And they know what happened and whereabouts he was. But it's a muddy river. It's a dirty river. It's not, you can't see in it. So they've had search and rescue out there. They have water rescue out there. They have the dive team out there. They've brought out helicopters. They brought out the sonar radars. And not only have they not found this young man yet, which is just devastating. Every moment that we're clinging to getting some sort of closure for him and for this family, they've thought they found him twice. And whoever is on the scene relaying messages to us pedestrians saying they found him, at this point I'm really upset with whoever is doing that, because what happened was they found him, text everybody he's been found, and then literally 4 minutes later say, never mind, it's somebody else. And we're like, what the hell? In this small community of less than 300 people, yes, this river goes all the way up to Missouri, and it's huge, whatever, but oh my God, no one else is reporting missing. Like, what the hell? And will we ever know what has happened there, and who that poor person is, and what's going on, and how did they get there? And so that was devastating. So then fast forward like 12 hours last night, they did the same thing, sent a text out, he's been found. And I'm just like, thank you, Jesus. Thank you. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. And then again, 5 minutes later, they say false alarm. I guess it was a a tree stump and roots, and I still have no clue how they could have mistaken that for him. None. But I was pissed by then. Because they send out that message and wait just long enough for you to be hopeful and tell other people that are all waiting to hear. Our whole community is hanging on the edge of a cliff waiting to hear. We want this boy found. We want closure for his family. And I say boy, he's 21, yes, but he's little petite. He's a young man just starting his life. Oh my God. And just, anyways, he's not been found. So this is something that I'm not going to be filming any videos this next week, you guys. I just can't. We've got 3 funerals coming up. Connor's recovery. I'm trying to handle work stuff. And then this young man, he needs to be found. And if he's found soon, we'll have his funeral soon. If he's not found soon, that's just crisis overload in our community. It really is. It's bad. So please pray that he's located immediately for his family and his poor mother. I cannot even imagine, you guys. Please say a prayer for them. Anyways, that's what's going on with us, you guys. I did film a garden update video when we got home from vacation, which I'm going to go ahead and post in a day or two. But then other than that, you probably won't see much. Just, I don't know when I'll post again. But thank you for your support and your love and continued prayers. And we love you guys. And try to have a good day. I'm going to try. Just pray constantly.